It's now my pleasure to go ahead and tell you a couple of my colleagues have been joining us as well tonight. We have Mr. Steve Gregg. He also works in admissions at Mercyhurst University. We have Caitlin Burek, who works in our Student Financial Services office. And then we also have my colleague, Nina Campbell, who works in undergraduate admissions with me. It's now my pleasure to go ahead and introduce Mr. Steve Gregg. He'll go ahead and talk to you a little bit about some of the agenda items tonight. Mr. Gregg?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Andrea. Tonight, what our hope is to take some of the anxiety and stress out of the process of filing a FAFSA and determining what types of financial aid eligibilities you or your son and daughter might be eligible for if they come to Mercyhurst or any other colleges or universities that they might be looking for. So tonight we're going to talk about the FAFSA filing process, what that is and why you need to do it. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the different types of federal student aid that is out there. If you're a Pennsylvania resident, we're going to talk about some of the state grants and state funds that are out there. And then we're going to talk about some Mercyhurst specific information regarding institutional scholarships, grants, and costs. But first, where we want to start is the idea of filing a FAFSA form. So first off, the FAFSA form, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And every student that's looking to go to college should probably fill one of those out. And you can do that at studentaid.gov. Please make sure that when you fill that out, you fill it out at studentaid.gov. There are some weird things out there on the internet, and if you end up at FAFSA.com, while it'll ask you for the same information, it is not free. So make sure that you are going to studentaid.gov to fill out that particular application. If you're a current high school senior and you're looking to attend school next fall, the window to start filling out that FAFSA form and applying for financial aid open on October 1st. So if you haven't done so already and you need to file that, you probably want to take some time over the next few weeks, maybe over your winter break, sit down with your parents and fill that out. Over the last few years, the FAFSA has moved to something that we call a prior year model. And basically what that means is that in order to fill out a FAFSA form now, you're going to utilize your financial information from 2 years prior to when the academic year begins of your freshman year. So for those of you that are high school seniors that are going to fill out the 2021-2022 FAFSA form, you're going to want to utilize your 2019 income tax information 2 years prior to when your fall semester would begin. The purpose of filling out the FAFSA form is to kind of provide a foundation for financial aid offices and for families to start planning what their costs and what their aid are going to look like for college. Two of the terms that you're going to hear throughout the process when you're reviewing financial aid offers, when you're talking with financial aid counselors or your admissions folks here at Mercyhurst, are something called an expected family contribution and something called a cost of attendance. The expected family contribution is the result of the information that you're going to input on the FAFSA form. It's basically a metric for financial aid offices to determine what types of federal funding, state funding, and potentially other need-based sources of financial aid that you might be eligible to receive. The expected family contribution isn't necessarily the expected amount of tuition money that a student will spend every year, but it's kind of a jumping off point. The other term there is the cost of attendance. So as you're planning out what your costs are going to look like for your first year, there are something called direct costs. Your direct costs are tuition and fees and room and board, the actual amount of money that it costs to go to school. But in terms of determining financial aid eligibility, we utilize something called a cost of attendance, and it kind of adds a little bit of a buffer on top of those direct costs because we know that students have transportation costs back and forth for breaks. There's the cost of textbooks and some of those other auxiliary items that exist as you're becoming a college student. The cost of attendance is utilized to determine aid eligibility, right? So any student that's going to school pays the direct costs, but the cost of attendance is kind of an additional figure with those added items that we utilize for aid eligibility. The third term that you're going to see a lot is this idea of financial need. Financial need is basically the cost of attendance at whatever institution that you're attending, less what that expected family contribution number is after you file that FAFSA. That window there that we call the financial need is what we're going to try and fill with the different financial aid resources that are at your disposal. So let's talk a little bit more about this EFC, or this expected family contribution. As you start filling out that FAFSA form, it's going to ask you a slew of questions, everything from your age and your address, from what type of academic program you're going into, pretty much everything except what your favorite color is. And what the FAFSA does is it takes the answers to all that information and spits out this expected family contribution. Whether you are going to Mercyhurst or whether you're going to Penn State, the EFC, that expected family contribution number, is the same, okay? And it is based on all the information that you're putting in on your FAFSA. Things that will move your EFC in any of a number of directions are your family income, parents' assets on top of income, the number of folks that live in the household, the number of dependents in any household that are going to college. So if you are a high school senior and you have an older sibling that is already attending an institution, as you're becoming a freshman next year, their eligibilities could change because now there are two students in the household that are going to school. If mom or dad potentially own a business with greater than 100 full-time employees, that type of information will have to be utilized on the FAFSA form to help determine what that EFC is. And then also if mom or dad has been saving money in a college savings plan of 529, that type of information will also need to be reported and factored into that calculation. There are some assets out there that do not factor into this calculation, and these are questions that we often hear quite a bit. The value of the home that you live in is not an asset that has to be reported on the FAFSA form. Any type of retirement funds that you have, 403Bs, 401Ks, pensions, those types of things are not assets that have to be reported, or any type of insurance benefits. As you're getting ready to file that FAFSA form, often one of the most confusing things that our students and families deal with is this idea of creating FSA IDs. An FSA ID is basically your username and your password for filing the FAFSA form. And it's also the student's username and password for filling out student loan documents once they are a student. The thing to remember with the FSA ID is that both the parent of the dependent child and the student that will be attending school in the fall both have to have individual and separate FSA IDs, okay? So it has to be the parent and the student. And you can go to studentaid.gov/FSA ID to create those. I recommend doing that in advance of starting the FAFSA form. It will make your life easy. The other tidbit that I will add to that is to make sure that you write that information down or keep it somewhere safe, because every subsequent year that the student is in school, they will have to refile a FAFSA form, and that FSA ID information will be needed. You can always retrieve that information, from the appropriate websites, but in my experience, it's a lot easier if you just have that on a note card or in a folder or in your desk drawer somewhere. The FAFSA can be filled out with all the appropriate income information. However, it is not considered completed and submitted to the Department of Education until both the student and the parent have attached their FSA IDs as signatures. Once the FSA IDs are attached to the FAFSA, then that information is electronically sent to the colleges or universities that you will have selected on the FAFSA form. So as you're looking at different colleges and universities, you can actually submit your FAFSA information and have it sent automatically. So I believe up to 10 different institutions. So as you're going through the application process, you can disperse that information to all those different institutions. As I mentioned, you'll need that FSA ID, not just for FAFSA filing, but for some of the other loan documents and forms that will come after you decide what school you're going to go to. So as you're starting to apply for financial aid and you're starting to fill out the FAFSA form, one of the things that you should be aware of is who can actually receive federal dollars and receive eligibility upon filing that FAFSA. One of the first things is any U.S. citizen, national, or eligible non-citizen can access federal financial aid dollars. Anybody who has a high school diploma or a high school equivalency is eligible for funding, as long as they are enrolling or enrolled in a degree or certificate program at a approved college or career school. Additionally, every student has to have a social security number, and male college students must have already applied for the selective service, and that's really easy to do online. Additionally, students have to maintain academic standards while they are enrolled in their college. There are minimum academic benchmarks that have to be met annually. Those are usually outlined in the student handbooks at the university, and those are managed by the financial aid office to determine who's maintaining those standards. So as you are filling out the FAFSA form, whose information needs to be supplied to determine eligibility? The first thing is that parents of dependent children, in most cases, have to supply some sort of income information. If you're married filing jointly, mom and dad's information would go on there. If it's a different marital situation, the general rule of thumb is it's the custodial parent or step parent's information that should go on the FAFSA form. And if it's a joint custody situation, it's usually where the student spends the most time living, or the parent who provides more than 50% of the financial support in that previous year. And if you have further questions about those things, because sometimes those situations can be complicated, don't hesitate to ask either your admissions counselor or your financial aid counselor. The thing that I find stresses out parents quite a bit as they're getting ready to file the FAFSA is making sure that they're prepared and have all the resources in front of them when they sit down at their computer or their tablet to fill that out. If you're putting together your laundry list of items to have in your folder or on your desk next to you, this list is a pretty good list. You want to make sure you have social security numbers, and it's social security number. So the student attending school, you're going to need their social security number, and then you're going to need the social security numbers of any of the parental folks that are going to go on the FAFSA. So mom and dad's, or mom and stepdad's social security numbers as well. 2019 tax information, you're going to want your W-2s and your actual federal tax return, the 1040 or the 1040A or the 1040EZ that you're going to file every year. There is some information on the W-2 that you might be utilizing, but most of the information that you're going to to enter in comes off of the 1040. So make sure you have those handy. If you received any untaxed income in 2009, make sure you have an idea of what those income amounts are. You'll be asked to input that information. And then you should have a pretty good idea of how much money you currently have in any active checking or savings accounts, because you'll have to report that information as well. Any type of investment records that aren't retirement funds, you should know what those balances are and have that information readily available. Additionally, it will save you a lot of trouble if you have valid and active email addresses for all students and parents information that is going to go on there. And then again, like I mentioned, make sure that you have already created and know FSA IDs. And if you have all that information in front of you, it'll make the process of filling out this form quite a bit easier. An added tool that the Department of Education added to the FAFSA filing process a few years ago is something called the IRS data retrieval tool. This will save you a lot of time, and it will save you a lot of grief. In past years, every college-bound student had to hand enter all the tax information off of all those various documents into their individual FAFSA forms. Now, if you attack this appropriately, what you should be able to do is to actually import your IRS tax information from 2009 directly from the IRS's database into your FAFSA form. In order to do that, one, you need to make sure you have your FSA ID available. And then one of the things that I recommend doing is still having your paper tax return in front of you, because it will ask for your name and address information to start the import. And you have to enter your address in exactly how it looks on your tax return. So it's case sensitive, punctuation matters. And if you're somebody who maybe goes through a H&R Block or somewhere else to have your taxes done, they might write your address down in a little bit of a different way than what you typically do. So make sure you have that stuff in front of you. But the IRS data retrieval tool will save you a lot of time in entering in all that information. It'll also make sure that you don't transpose a number or enter a figure in the wrong box. It'll automatically import that information for you. And that's kind of a look of what that would be. Basically, you match up your contact information with what the IRS has on file. You click transfer now, and it dumps in all that information automatically. Okay, so you've gone through the process of filing a FAFSA form, of using the IRS data retrieval tool, of sending your information off to the schools that you're looking to attend. What happens next? Well, the first thing is that your college's student financial service office will look to see what types of federal funding you might be eligible for. There are federal grants, there are federal loans. One of the first funds out there is the federal Pell Grant. It is a need-based grant. The maximum grant that a student might be eligible for this current academic year was just shy of $6,400. We will find out in the coming months what the maximum Pell Grant money will be for next year, but generally it goes up $100 or so every year. The FAFSA form will also help us determine if a student is eligible for federal work study. Federal work study, if you're eligible for, basically you are awarded the opportunity to earn a specific amount of money while working on campus in kind of a part-time job. Most students that are eligible for one of those work study jobs work 4 to 5 hours a week doing something on campus. There are other need-based grants for low-income students, like the SEOG grant. And then most importantly, the FAFSA form helps us determine what types of federal direct student loans a student might be eligible for. Most students are going to be eligible for up to $5,500 in federal loan money in their first year. Some of that could be subsidized or some of that could be unsubsidized. The difference between the two are that subsidized loans, the government basically pays the interest while you're in school, and the unsubsidized loans, they don't. Also, the federal aid that's available out there are federal Parent Plus loans. We'll talk a little bit about those down the road here. So undergraduates, federal direct loans, the current interest rate on those is 2.75% fixed. To put that in the perspective, I think if you went to your local bank or your credit union today and wanted to apply for a student loan, they quote you an adjustable rate, probably, I don't know, probably in the 8% area, maybe even higher than that. So as you're starting the process of funding education, the federal direct student loan program is a great starting point. Again, like I mentioned, as a freshman student, most people are going to be eligible for up to $5,500. As you go through your educational journey, those federal direct loan amounts increase. So once you become a sophomore student, you're eligible for up to $6,500. And then once you're a junior and senior, you're eligible for up to $7,500 per academic year. Whether the direct loan is subsidized or whether it's unsubsidized, you're not required to make principal payments on those loans while the student is in school. The student is not required to make those payments until 6 months after they graduate or leave school. You are able to make interest payments while you're in school if you're in the financial situation to do that, but that is not required. The additional federal loan program that's out there is something called the Parent Plus loan program. So in situations where there is still financial need and mom or dad want to help with the cost of paying tuition, parents can borrow a federal direct loan. It's called a Parent Plus loan. The interest rates on that this current year are 5.3%. There are some loan fees there. The federal direct plus loan, basically you can borrow up to the cost of attendance after any other financial aid resources are utilized. This loan works very different than any of the other loans that you might have in your life. Basically, you fill out a loan application and they run your credit. There's no debt to income test. There's no other income information that they ask for. It's a loan purely based on your credit rating. The difference between a federal direct plus loan and a federal direct student loan revolve around the idea of who owns the loan and when the repayments start. So this is a parent plus loan. So mom and or dad, whoever borrows a loan, it's their loan, not the student's. And repayments on these loans start immediately, not after the student has graduated. For some folks, if you apply for the Parent Plus loan and based on the credit check, you're not approved for the loan, there are situations then where the student has the opportunity of borrowing up to an additional $4,000 in direct student loan money in their name. So even in situations sometimes where you might not be approved for the loan, your financial aid counselor or admissions counselor might recommend at least filling out the application to sometimes access that additional eligibility student loans. Sometimes, we were talking about this a little bit before everybody logged on here this evening, sometimes a student's FAFSA is flagged for something called verification. And if you get a letter in the mail or an email in the coming weeks that says you were flagged for verification, this is nothing really to freak out about, okay? Basically, about 1/3 of all FAFSAs that are filed are flagged for verification. And basically what that means is that a college or university just has to double check and verify that the information that is listed on a student's FAFSA form matches what is actually on the income tax information that was filed with the IRS. So if you are flagged for verification, don't freak out. Just make sure that you submit whatever documentation is requested of you to the financial aid office in a timely fashion. I will tell you that this is another one of the benefits of using the IRS data retrieval tool when filing the FAFSA, is that there's generally a smaller chance of being flagged for verification, or if you are flagged, there's little to no documentation that you have to submit to the financial aid office because you already imported it directly from the IRS. So let's transition a little bit from federal information in federal dollars and talk a little bit about some state information. So those of you who might be Pennsylvania residents, you may have heard of an agency called PHEAA, P-H-E-A-A. That's the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. And the state of Pennsylvania offers some grant and loan programs to college-bound students who are attending a college university in Pennsylvania. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you are doing is that you're filing your federal FAFSA form, okay, prior to May 1st in order to be eligible for any types of state funding next year. So if you are intent on entering into a 4-year baccalaureate degree, make sure you get that FAFSA filed well in advance of May 1st. If you're potentially thinking about going into an associate degree program, you get a little bit of a longer deadline till August 1st, but I would still make sure that you try and get it done early. Earlier is better than later. PHEAA does have a deal with some other states and commonwealths in the area. So if you live in any of the places that are listed on the slide there, there's potential that you might be eligible for some Pennsylvania state grant money, even though you live outside the state. In order to be eligible for a PHEAA state grant, you need to fill out a FAFSA before May 1st. And then a lot of times there's a supplemental state grant form that you'll need to fill out directly with PHEAA. And some of the things that they're going to ask are whether you intend on being a full-time or a part-time student when you are enrolled in college. If you have a 529 college savings program and what the value of that savings program currently is. What type of academic program you plan on going into, whether it's a vocational program, whether it's a medical program, or whether it's more of a traditional college degree program. And then a lot of times they're going to ask for student and parent employment status. On top of the PHEAA state grants program, Pennsylvania does now offer a loan program. It's called the PA Forward Loan Program. Works kind of similar to the federal program. And if you're in a situation where after your federal aid, your state grants, and maybe some institutional scholarship, that there's a need for some additional loan funds, and you're a Pennsylvania resident, I recommend going to the PHEAA website and reviewing that information to see if maybe you have some eligibility there. As always, you can always go online and find a lot of information about the financial aid process. When we're talking about federal and state information, go right to the source, right to the horse's mouth. If you go to studentaid.gov, there are a number of resources there that you can read and review. They also have a hotline number that you can call, and they're actually very helpful there. And the same with the state. On top of those two contacts at the federal and state level, you can always feel free to call either the admissions office or the student financial services office here at Mercyhurst. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about those different funds. On top of the federal funding and on top of the state funding, there are also opportunities for financial aid eligibility through Mercyhurst. I'm going to turn it back over to Andrea for a few moments, and she can talk about some of the scholarship and grant money that you might be able to access through Mercyhurst.
Thanks so much, Steve, for that overview. I really appreciate all the information you shared regarding filing the FAFSA form state aid, federal aid, and things like that as well too. It's now my pleasure to go ahead and share a little bit of information about institutional financial aid at Mercyhurst University. One of the things I want to point out that I think is extremely helpful for students and families as they continue their college search, specifically at Mercyhurst University, is that our admissions office and our admissions counselors not only work with families throughout the fall as they submit their applications, but they maintain that contact with them because all freshman financial aid as well as transfer aid is done in our office. So we truly are one-stop shopping. We not only can go ahead and assist you with any application questions, but we are very well versed in financial aid as well too. As many of you may already know, if you've already received an acceptance decision, oftentimes our merit-based scholarships are awarded with an admissions decision. And this year, our merit-based scholarships will range between about $10,000 to upwards of about $24,000. So it is a really good start to a financial aid package. As we go ahead and look at what type of merit-based aid you'd be eligible for, we review your entire application. So we read those letters of recommendation, we look at your transcripts, we look at your test scores if you've submitted that. Using a combination of all of those things, then we can go ahead and determine what type of merit-based scholarship you would be eligible for. In addition, as Steve mentioned, sometimes there is a need for additional need-based institutional aid. All of these forms of institutional aid from Mercyhurst University are gift aid. So what I mean by that is it's aid that you're not going to ever have to pay back. So again, if there is a large difference maybe between your cost of attendance and also your estimated family contribution, we might go ahead and award you some additional aid. Sometimes you'll see that in the form of a presidential scholarship. Sometimes you'll see it in the form of a Mercy scholarship. So be on the lookout for that on your financial aid package. In addition, we have some exceptional awards that we can go ahead and give to students that are interested in music, dance, and art. So again, if you come to Mercyhurst as a music major or a dance major, typically you would come for an audition. And at that audition, your performance would be evaluated. And then they would determine what type of performance-based scholarships you'd be eligible for based off of your skill set. Art scholarships also are awarded, and those typically they will go ahead and require some slides to be submitted. And then they'll go ahead and again, see if maybe you are eligible for one of those Cummings Art Gallery scholarships as well too. And then the last form of institutional aid, sometimes that Mercyhurst University will go ahead and distribute, would be athletic aid. And that is awarded by the coaches. In our office, Holly Dietrich works very closely with most of our coaches. She is essentially our athletics liaison. So together they would determine if they had any athletic aid that you would be eligible for. And sometimes that can be stacked on top of merit-based aid and other forms of institutional aid as well too. So one of the things I like to tell families as they, again, begin the financial aid process is that any student that would like to come to Mercyhurst University, we most definitely want to see at Mercyhurst. And we realize that oftentimes the last piece of the puzzle that students are looking for, as well as their families, would be, again, that institutional aid and a full financial aid package. If you have filed your FAFSA form, oftentimes we have already started to distribute aid. We have quite a few out. We had our first financial aid packages to families right around Thanksgiving, and we'll send them out on a weekly basis. If for some reason you think that you have filed your FAFSA form and you've already received an acceptance decision to Mercyhurst University, but you haven't received a financial aid package from us, please feel free to go ahead and reach out to the admissions office. Again, I can't emphasize enough that we will work with you throughout the application process, and then we maintain that contact with you throughout the financial aid season as well too. If you get your full financial aid package and you have any questions on it, again, before you decide Mercyhurst University just isn't the place for you, feel free to go ahead and ask for some additional help understanding that financial aid package. We'd be happy to go ahead and have those types of discussions with you. Just so you guys know, this is kind of what our costs look like for the 2020-2021 academic year. So our tuition is flat rate tuition, which means that students can take up to 18 credits without incurring any overload fees. So to be a full-time student, mainly students take about 12 credits, but again, you could take up to 18 credits. So the cost of room, board, tuition, and fees for next year will be roughly about $54,000, depending on where you choose to live on campus. Our room and board is actually a blended plan, so that allows students to swipe in and out of the dining hall as many times a day as they would like as well too. As you can see, for any of our students that are from the local Erie County area, if you are a commuter, the cost of tuition and fees is about $42,000. While I realize, again, that those figures are often very daunting, please know that, again, there are a lot of resources out there to help make your college education a very affordable and attainable option for you and your students as well too. Should you have any questions as you navigate that process, as Steve mentioned, please call the admissions office. We are happy to go ahead and try to alleviate any of the stress associated with filing that process and or explaining your financial aid package to you as needed. A couple of other helpful tips I just wanted to let you know is I always encourage students to have some conversations with their guidance office, because again, sometimes they have some resources in your community that they can go ahead and encourage you to apply for some outside scholarships. Any outside scholarships that you apply for and are awarded, we will go ahead and stack that on top of the financial aid package that you've already received. So we're not going to go ahead and take away any institutional aid because you actually did some additional homework on your end, applied for some scholarships, and then were granted them. If you are looking for some national scholarships that you could go ahead and check out, fastweb.com is a great resource to go ahead and kind of keep in your back pocket as well too. Search for some things that you might think that you would be a good fit for, and again, submit those applications. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that you can always appeal to institutions for possible additional aid. Mercyhurst University does try to go out with the very highest financial aid package possible to go ahead and make your opportunity to attend Mercyhurst University as feasible as possible. But if it's not where it needs to be, again, feel free to give us a telephone call. By no means can I guarantee that there is any additional institutional aid to distribute. But again, we can talk about ways to help close that gap as well too. And then again, seek some additional assistance while you are enrolled. There are a lot of times some scholarship opportunities that you can actually receive once you are enrolled at any college, specifically at Mercyhurst as well too. Some of our students will go ahead and become resident assistants, which means that they essentially help students in our residence halls on campus. So as a freshman, all of our wings on every single floor in all three of our freshman residence halls are staffed by RAs. And oftentimes they receive a discount on their housing as well as meal plans. Sometimes students are interested in Army ROTC, and so they often, again, are awarded scholarships to go ahead and help fund their college education. The return for receiving an ROTC scholarship is that obviously then you are going to be serving in our Army for a specific number of years as well too, but many students find that to be very worthwhile, and we thank everybody for their service as well when they do go ahead and undertake that on our behalf. Another organization would be our student ambassadors. So if you've had an opportunity to go ahead and tour Mercyhurst University before, those ambassadors do receive a paycheck for going and touring students around our campus as well too. And those are just a few opportunities on our campus. So again, please make sure you are speaking with your guidance office, make sure you are checking scholarship websites online. And then again, please stay in contact with us as you receive your student financial aid package from Mercyhurst University. So that kind of concludes our presentation for this evening. We hope that we shared some valuable information with you about how to submit the FAFSA form, as well as different types of aid that you might see on your official financial aid package when you do go ahead and receive that from Mercyhurst University. We would be happy to go ahead and try to answer any questions that might actually be available for us right now. I'm just closing out that screen and starting to read our chat so I can go ahead and see if there are any in there. But if anybody would like to go ahead and pose a question audibly, again, I have Steve Gregg here who did give the most of the presentation tonight, as well as Caitlin Burek, who works in our Student Financial Services office, and then my colleague Nina Campbell, who is the Erie County Counselor in our admissions office as well too. Would anybody like to go ahead and unmute themselves and pose any questions to our speakers tonight? If not, I want to go ahead and make sure that I do provide everybody with the main admissions line. Our admissions number is 814-824-2202. So if you call that number, we can go ahead and get you connected with your specific counselor. Our counselors do work by specific geographic regions. We all kind of do exactly the same thing in our office, but again, we work by geographic territories, which allows us to go ahead and establish some relationships with our families and their students as well too. Bill just posed a question, and he was wondering if athletic aid is only available for D1 sports. We are a school that has Division I and Division II sports, and both Division I and Division II athletes are eligible for athletic aid. If no one has any additional questions, I hope that you found tonight's session informational and that it did put your mind at ease a little bit as you go ahead and conquer not only the application process for the FAFSA form, but also financial aid overall. Again, please stay in contact with us and we can go ahead and get any of your questions answered for you. Until I have an opportunity to see you on campus in person, I hope that everybody enjoys the upcoming holidays. I wish everybody continued good health. Carpe diem and enjoy your night.